Recording. Okay, so my name is Jonathan Millian, and I am an SBU alum, and I am now a producer at Eyewitness News, WABC TV, and this is going to be a discussion about the broadcast field in general, and also a little bit more of a discussion about kind of what it takes to navigate your career successfully in the first 8 to 10 years. Usually, basically your 20s. Everybody here is either just out of their 20s or still in their 20s, so it's all kind of really fresh in our minds. So I'm just going to start by going around and having everybody introduce themselves. We'll start with Brandon, also an SBU alum.
Yes, John and I actually graduated together, but my name is Brandon Baden. I am currently a producer at the Today Show. Previous to that, I worked at a bunch of talk shows mainly, and then finally came back to news about 3.5 years ago. And yeah.
Morena.
Hi, my name is Morena. I am the Nightside assignment editor at Channel 7. So I work along John and Candace, who are also on this call.
Candace.
Hi, my name is Candace McCowan. I am a reporter, fill-in anchor currently at WABC. It was very nice of you to say fresh out of our 20s, John. Maybe a little bit closer to 40, but that's all right. But still happy to be included.
Darissa.
Hi, I am Darissa White. I am a freelance reporter at various entertainment stations and articles and different things. And I work full-time as an entertainment relations manager at CARE, which is a humanitarian organization.
Aren't you forgetting something?
And I am a TikTok. He wants me to mention my TikTok. I am a TikTok. I don't even know what you would say.
You're a TikTok influencer. You're over 100,000 followers now, right?
I am over 100,000 followers, just barely. Okay. But yes, I just actually got into my little TikTok thing, and yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, then let's kind of start with the beginnings of our careers. So, Brandon, do you want to kind of take us through, like, what were your initial goals as you were preparing to graduate, and then how did things play out from there? Did things kind of go the way that you were expecting them to go, either positively or negatively?
I think so. In Stony Brook, obviously we're all journalism, news majors, but somehow I figured my way out to doing entertainment packages and focusing everything on celebrities. I don't know why they let me do that, but it ended up working out. And while at Stony Brook, I did a bunch of internships at various talk shows and a soap opera. And straight out of college, I ended up working for Katie Couric's talk show as a production assistant. And so from there, I kind of made my way through, like, up the ranks and through the talk show world. I worked at Inside Edition, then I went and worked at Dr. Oz, then went to LA, worked at TMZ, came back, worked at a show called Page 6 TV, and now I'm at the Today Show. And so I think I was able to take a lot of risk because, as you know, television industry, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people wants to be in the industry, and it's shows get canceled, especially talk shows. And so moving from one show to the next is always some sort of risk. But luckily, it all brought me to where I am now. And so was I expecting to be a producer at the Today Show and kind of be doing more hard news? Not really, but I think right now it's a good balance of entertainment with human interest and hard news.
Morena.
Hi. So my story is a little different. My family lives in Florida. So I did 2 years at a university down there. And I went through this whole thing of where I was like, I want to move to New York. So I moved up here and I did my last 2 years at Brooklyn College. I was working at a YMCA for those 2 years. And in my head, it was kind of like, I have to get a job if I want to stay up here. So I kind of made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to stay in New York unless I landed sort of on my feet in journalism. So while I was at school, my last year at Brooklyn College, I landed an internship at New York One. So I did that. I got really lucky. New York One is kind of like the first best shop, I would say. They kind of teach you to do everything. So I was spending time with John. I was on the assignment desk. I was doing what Darissa did too, which is she worked at a photog for a real long time. So you kind of got to dip your feet everywhere. And then eventually they hired me freelance, and then they hired me as an assignment editor. I didn't even know what assignment editing was when I got to New York One. I knew I wanted to be in journalism. I knew I wanted to tell stories, and I really like local news. But I really had no idea what assignment editing was, and they kind of fell on my feet. When I was interning, they put me on the desk, and I ended up really, really loving it. So I think you don't really know, you don't have to know what you want to do particularly. I think you kind of go into places where you fall into place. And from there, I just, I worked hard, but I also got lucky. And the person that I was with at New York One, she went to Pix 11, WPIX. She took me with her. She ended up actually going back to New York One. I stayed at Pix. And then from there, I ended up going to Channel 7, which is where I am now. So, I think it's about working a lot. At one point I was working at the YMCA, interning at New York One, and going to school. So I think you had to kind of prioritize what you want. I never really had my college crazy experience because I was just trying to land on my feet. But it paid off. So that's kind of where I am today.
Thank you, Marina. Candace, so in college and right out of college, what were your goals and what ended up happening?
So in college, I'm from Atlanta, and I wanted to be an anchor in Atlanta, and that was the goal. And then, you start reporting, move markets, move up. And then I had no interest really, not that I wasn't interested, it just wasn't on my radar working here in New York. And then I got married and my husband lived here. So New York it was. And so I've been here for 5.5 years now. So I definitely think life is a little bit different than what I expected. But, you made a reference to age and our and where we are in our careers, things still change over time. So, I think that we have this picture that all of our goals are supposed to be reached by a certain time. And there's still plenty of time to reach some of those goals, so. That's what
Thank you, Candace. Darissa, I know a little bit more about your story, but tell everybody else about it.
Yeah, so when I graduated in 2015 from Southern Illinois University, and I was working as a production assistant for the WSIU. It's like the NPR station that everybody has in college. And I am just the type of person where I just like challenges and I like new things and I like to do new stuff. So I was like, I just told my manager, I said, you know what, I want to go to New York. I want to move to New York. I had no plan, but I just felt like life is just going to happen for me. And if it doesn't, I mean, if I fail, then at least I tried. And I think that getting out of college, like you need to have that reminder, it's okay to fail. But if you never do it, then you won't ever know. So I just moved straight to New York, and I was waitressing. I was a bartender. And I actually met this lovely couple, and they asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Chicago. And they said, well, what are you doing here? And I said, I want to be a reporter. And they were like, well, where are you working? And I was like, I'm just a bartender. And they ended up, they knew someone who worked at New York One. And I had an interview like within 2 weeks of me moving to New York City. And so I started freelancing, like Marina said, at New York One, and I was a camera person there for a long time. And it was so frustrating. And I think when you're in your 20s, you just feel like you're never going to like have your dream manifest, because it's just everything has to happen right then and there. But eventually, like I said, life goes on. And then I met someone else and they ended up hiring me as a reporter, freelance as a reporter. So I was like working New York One full time, and I was working on the weekends at the station called BronxNet. And eventually I just asked them, I said, hey, I would really like a full-time job here. And they hired me as a reporter there full time. And then I quit New York One. And then I started working at News 12 freelance, just the same, freelance. And then I was working full time at BronxNet. And then eventually I was like, it comes a time where you want more money. So I just was like, you know what, I need to get a full-time job where I can at least like buy a house in the future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I am now doing what I like. I enjoy it, at least at CARE. I'm working with celebrities and I'm freelancing at other places. I'm actually still freelancing at News 12, but I'm not taking shifts. And yeah.
Thank you, Darissa.
Mhm.
So one thing that I heard there a lot is that it sounds like we all kind of had our target, and whether that came during college or a little bit after college, it sounds like all of us had the intention to go into journalism and then to build a career there. And at which point we are all quite successful at it now. Brandon, I was kind of thinking about you when you were saying, because you had some pretty specific goals. You loved entertainment, and you focused a lot on that. And then for much of your career, it sounds like you were in entertainment, so you really kind of succeeded early in what you wanted to do. How did you manifest that? How does that kind of thing happen, or did it just happen?
Honestly, it kind of just happened. Like originally I wanted to work in radio. That was my original goal, like entertainment type of radio. But then I guess through my internships, which I had 5 internships in college, and this is why I always tell people it's so important, is that it kind of put me ahead of some other people who didn't have that experience. And at one of my internships, one of the vice presidents of the production company ended up sending my resume after I graduated college. I really didn't know this lady, but she recognized my work. And so that sent me off into my first job, which was at Katie Couric's talk show. And honestly, when I started there, the position that I thought I was going to be doing wasn't really what I was doing. But it was a new show, and I knew that there was a need in the like celebrity booking department. And I kind of just said what I wanted to do. I reached out to those celebrity producers, and I told them that that's kind of the area I wanted to go in. And they were able to take me under their wing, and that set me off. One of those producers ended up getting my job at Inside Edition, and kind of like so on and so forth. So I think one of the most important things I know I was scared to do working in the industry was saying what I want to do. A lot of people say they want to be reporters and they're afraid that they're going to be judged for wanting to be on camera, especially if they're working behind the scenes at first. If you're working in news, you want to do more celebrity. Some people don't want to speak about that, but it's kind of like if you say what you want to do and you manifest it and you put in the work, it can happen. So luckily for me, I was able to carve the path and keep at it. So where I am today, which is now I work at the Today Show. I do hard news, but I focus on celebrity producing, which is kind of like what I was saying before, is a good mix of the two.
Awesome. Yeah. When you're talking about having a leg up on people with those internships, one of those people you're talking about is me, who I really dragged my feet there, and which is for the first, like, especially like 20 years of my life was pretty common. I've always been a bit of like a procrastinator, maybe not great at planning, but I think there were some key moments in my life where I identified that this was something I needed to seize upon. One of those was pretty simple. I was going into my summer, the summer before my senior year, and there was I got an email from Professor Selvin, as we've gotten many of those, and she had just giving a heads up about a little internship fair that was going on in a classroom somewhere on campus. And I said, all right, I'm just going to go because I need to do something. And I went there, and long story short, I ended up getting a internship at newsday.com for their sports section. And I worked in the evenings into the night, basically until like around midnight. And I worked at that time, there was only 2 people there at night working the web, me, an intern, and then one person doing the news section who did work there. And we built up a relationship. And towards the end of that, I mentioned that I kind of wanted to do something in TV. And she was like, oh, you should try New York One. And I was like, what's New York One? Because I lived all the way out on Long Island. I had not a lot of experience in the city. I didn't even know New York One existed. But she was like, yeah, this is it's something that all New Yorkers swear by. You should give it a shot. So I reached out. And then sure enough, I got an internship there on the in the fall. And I loved it from the first moment I got there. And knew that this was kind of the direction I wanted to go. And then by the end of that semester, I had an inkling that if I stayed there for another internship, which was difficult because at that point I had become, good at doing internship interviews. So I had an offer from like the Colbert Report and ESPN, I think. And but I felt like I wanted to have a career. And it just seemed like this was a good place to start it. And Marina mentioned this before, the way that I've described New York One to interns I've worked with there and other places when talking about my path is that like New York One is like a teaching hospital for journalism, where it really gives people a shot to get their feet wet and kind of like find their bearings. And that's exactly what happened to me. I decided to intern there my spring semester in the sports department. Got to live out some of my dreams of like, being in locker rooms and going to games and covering them. And then 2 weeks after I graduated, they hired me as a freelance writer. And that was all I needed. That was the beginning of my career. So that all started because I decided to go to an internship, little internship fair in a classroom. So it can be pretty, it can be pretty subtle, like the big moments in your life. And Marina, I know that you mentioned that it felt, maybe I'm like exaggerating this, but it kind of felt like the beginning of your path was like a little bit more like high stakes. It was like either I get this done or I have to go somewhere else. Was that like a time of like, I mean, that this is kind of a loaded question because we all were anxious, but like how much anxiety did that bring you? And then how did you overcome that?
I think for me, I could have stayed in New York working where I was working. I just kind of like, why? In my head, it was like, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here and I'm going to do what I want to do. So I kind of set up this timeline for myself. When you're in the thick of it, I think you don't think about it. I was working hours that like, I don't know, I was opening up the gym I was working at 4 a.m. and then I was doing an 8-hour and then I was going to New York One. Like you do things that looking back now, when I'm exhausted, I'm like, how was I doing all these things? But I think when you're in the thick of it and you're doing something you enjoy, you don't really think about it. I think the most important part is it's all about not saying no. And I think the people who didn't say no and worked the crazy hours and, picked up the 6th day and it sucks, but you just kind of have to prioritize, like, what do I want? Do I want weekends off or do I want, to have this career and have this life? And I think the people who don't say no, which are all on the Zoom call, are people who eventually kind of end up going down the path that they're looking to go down on. But I think when I look at some of the people who ended up maybe leaving news, or it felt like it wasn't for them, it comes down to picking what lifestyle you want. And it's also totally fine to realize like, hey, I want a more stable lifestyle. This is, what I want. I want weekends off, or I want a 9 to 5. But I think if journalism is what you're looking for, it's about working for it and working insane hours that eventually, I think, pay off. But yeah, I think it's all about working.
Gonna ask you probably a question that's gonna annoy you a little bit. What's it like being a prodigy? Because when Morena walked in the door at New York One, it was like a couple of weeks before everybody was like, well, this person's gonna have a very long career in journalism. And from what I remember, the little I remember at that point, because my brain is fried, but like from what I remember at that point, that wasn't like a secret. Like that was stuff that was told to your face often, is that you were just very good. And I think that you being, I forget how old you are, but you're definitely younger than the rest of us. And you're at Eyewitness News, #1 station in the country. At your age, I mean, I think everything played out how people expected it to. Was that added pressure, or was that like confirmation that I'm going in the right direction, or did you not think about that at all? Just like the expectations people had from you at very early on.
So I'm 28. I'm also an immigrant. I wasn't born here. I was born in Argentina. So I think that the hardworking pressure, that's just kind of like part of my persona. I've always been like, go, 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 go. I was always very thankful that people enjoyed working with me and liked me. And, I wasn't ever conceited about it. I was always very like thankful and lucky. And I think I never wanted to disappoint anyone. That's also a big thing. So I just kind of kept pushing in the right direction. But look, I think a lot of it is hard work, and a lot of it is networking and knowing people. I wouldn't have gotten to Pix if the person I worked with at New York One didn't leave there and was like, hey, come along. So I think it's kind of all about who you know, moving in the right circle, networking, socializing, talking, everyone who's kind of had that help of like, hey, come in, we'll interview next week, or it's all about sort of just moving in the right circle. What did you write, John? Oh, but yeah, so I got lucky, I worked really, really hard. And I picked up a lot of really horrible hours, and I never lived my like fun college years, but I kind of was able to do what I want and do what I love. So, and I think as Brendan said too, you have to keep in mind what you want in the long run. I think you kind of let people steer you in the direction that they want to steer you in, but always keep in mind what it is that you want to achieve. And as you spend more years in the industry, I think you can kind of learn to negotiate and start to say no to certain things too.
Candace, you mentioned before that it sounds like life took you in a couple of unexpected directions. In the case of, I think maybe at least early in our careers, like me and Brandon, like we kind of went in a way that we set our goals on. But you were, kind of taken across the country a little bit. How do you navigate something like that? Were there times very early on where you were like, I don't know if this was the right decision, or were the circumstances important? Were the circumstances important, more important than your career path?
Okay, so I think that, first of all, I love participating in these panels because I always find I'm the least interesting person and I learn something from everybody else. But I think that nothing's going to work out exactly like you plan it. And so as long as you feel like you're continuously moving forward, and I think that's something that's important about this career, because you kind of heard Brandon say, you kind of just do what you have to do I heard all of you say, you do what you have to do to get where you want to go. And you start moving in a direction. And as long as you feel like you're moving forward or getting closer to where you want to go, possibly, there's no like shut door, eventually, I mean, things can change forever, for decades, you know? So I never felt like I was doing something that I shouldn't be. My mom at some points were like, why the hell are you doing this? Like, quit, like, you know, come home. And I think that was the first time I was working a morning shift in Memphis, Tennessee. And like, which, you know, at that time, those hours seemed crazy, and standing in the cold and all this other stuff that I do every single day now. But, you know, I never thought about quitting. You just keep on pushing forward, you know? And I think when you talk about, first of all, Brandon talked about doing what you have to do, and you, John, also getting your foot in the door. But Mirena talked about the hustle she had and her working, going to school and doing all those jobs. This is not a business I think that you're going to survive in if you're not willing to hustle. And so all those things that she did is why she's here. And so if you take nothing else away from this, is you're going to have to hustle. And then Darissa talked about the pay. You're not going to get paid that much, you know, and you have to be willing to make those sacrifices in the beginning. And eventually you're going to be like, wait, pay me. I have the experience now. No, I never felt like, I felt like I was getting the experience that I needed. And again, you get to that point where you're like, hey, wait a second. And I think for me, at least during the pandemic, it was a moment of reflection of, hey, is this what I'm doing? Is it what I want to be doing? What would I change? What would I tweak? And then you act accordingly, because at a certain point you do have the experience to demand more and leverage opportunities. You know, I got this job at WABC by getting a job at another station and going to WABC and be like, hey, listen, I've got this job, because they were kind of like, I don't know, beating around the bush before that. And I was like, I've got this other job. And they're like, no, you're going to start here. Managers love wanting something that somebody else wants. I mean, I don't think that's just managers, it's human nature. So always leverage, find multiple jobs at one time is my advice always. So.
Well said. Darissa, so I think your career path has taken you maybe in some of the most unexpected directions out of all of us. But at the same time, from my perspective, you also somehow continue to do what you want, though. Like it seems like from what we've talked about in terms of your goals, you found no matter if it's in journalism, if it's in entertainment, if it's in public relations, you've been able to find the things that you're most passionate about within each one of those jobs. TikTok too, same thing. What is it like to have all these twists and turns and yet still be able to keep your eye on your prize?
That's a great question. And also, I just want to say, Candace, you are absolutely not the least, important person. I think you said you have been in multiple conversations that I have been a part of, and everybody has praised you. And I personally look up to you. So, I just want to say that. And
it's actually a little bit nauseating how much they talk about you, Candace.
Seriously, no, it's real. Like, I mentioned to John and, Janae and Mary Lynn, and a lot of the journalists at News 12 really love your reporting style, and they've brought you up in so many conversations, and it's been absolutely beautiful. So I just want to share that with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then also, Mirena, we know when you came to New York One, you were like, I was there when everybody was like, no, Mirena is going to go network.
So nice of you.
Everybody said that, but kind of like what Brandon mentioned about manifesting. I know a lot of people say that, they don't believe in manifestation, and they don't believe, and John, and we have our personal conversations about that. And I know you don't believe in that, but I do, and I think that, when you have a vision in your head and you are able to see that vision clearly, you will always end up in the best situation for your growth. And I think that, I'm very young in my career, but I also know that every situation, every career or job that I've had, I needed it for my growth. So New York won, although I was, literally the bottom of the totem pole. I was just a camera person and, kind of taking my guidance from Morena. I knew that I needed that for my growth. And then that helped me when I got my other jobs at News 12 and at BronxNet, because I took that, camera experience and I was like, hey, I'm able to shoot. I'm able to I have this experience from this job. And I think that even my current job now, my full-time job, even though it is not in news, I am learning how to do strategy. And that is something that I have not been able to do because I've always had field experience. And so I think that when you just have a vision in your head and you have a vision that is so clear and realistic in your head, even though it's not realistic in anybody else's head. And everybody, even Don Lemon told me, he said, Darissa, I think that you need to go to Alabama. I think that's what he said. He was like, you need to start out in Alabama. And he's like, you need to just like work your way up through the markets. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I didn't do that. I went straight to New York and I was able to work my way up. And like I said, when you just kind of look at it like, this is my vision and I'm going to stick to this path. I don't know how it is going to, like Brandon said, manifest. I just know that whatever situation I'm put in, it is crucial to my growth. It's going to always like work out the way that you want to work, want it to work out. And I know that my time at CARE is not forever. I'm happy there. I love working with celebrities. I love learning strategy. I love, kind of coming up with ideas of who we can use for this campaign and reaching out to their teams and seeing, I love that. But I also know that that is not my purpose, right? And so when you know your purpose, when you have that vision in your head, it's always going to just continue. It's always just going to continue. It's always going to continue. So I hope that kind of answered it. I was everywhere with it, but.
No, it's very Darissa answer. I think that one of the things that you mentioned that I kind of identified with is the Don Lemon thing, because I had a very similar. There's always going to be somebody earlier in your career. I'm sure Irina, with you and anybody watching this, there's always going to be somebody that says, you got to go to Nebraska. You got to go start there if you want to do that. And I think that, Darissa is an example of like the very, very, very typical example of like, if you're a reporter, that's kind of what you got to do, but very clearly, not necessarily. You targeted New York and you came to New York and you got it done. For me, it was a little bit different because I always knew that I didn't want to be on camera. I was much more interested in the producer side through even in college. And then once I got my internship at New York One, that just kind of solidified it. But in my first interview at New York One to be an intern there, the internship coordinator at the time, Melissa McGuire, who actually also worked at Eyewitness News for a bit and was my early mentor. Once I got there, I mentioned in passing, like halfway through the interview, that I didn't want to be on camera, and she stopped me. She was like, "That's the first thing you should have said, because that is something that makes you stand out." Because a lot of people have, different goals. A lot of people want to be on camera, and anything that makes you stand out, you should think about that and try to put that at the forefront. So I would certainly recommend, one, like, don't be scared off if you want to be in New York. If you want to be in New York, there's ways to be in New York. And two, if you feel like there's something that you are, good at, or something that makes you stand out, don't be afraid to put that at the forefront. Irina, in a second, I'm going to come to you, but I have one more question for the group. Anybody, you're all going to have to answer one, but anybody can answer in whatever order they want. I want to talk a little bit about something that I think is extremely important that not enough people talk about, which is failure and rejection. And that is something early in your career that even Morena, like everybody's going to have a little bit of failure, a little bit of rejection, a little bit of feeling like maybe they're stalled or second guessing themselves in some way. That's happened to me literally countless times at this point. So I just want to kind of hear what you guys think of how you feel about dealing with your early failures, your initial rejections. How do you get through that?
I'll go. I think that rejection comes in many forms, but everybody goes through it. So you just have to be prepared to know that, not get discouraged. It's like getting man on the street interviews. You're going to get like, or being a salesman, you're going to get 10 no's for every 1 or 2 yeses you get. So I always say that one man does not get to decide what your career is. I've had a news director who's told me, you'll never be an anchor. Some people just aren't anchors. And I'm like, okay, who gave him the authority to say that? And you have to learn that nobody has the authority to say, like, you can't do this, you know? And I've told other people that just because somebody is telling you no, that just means not now. And you can do it. Don't just take their no, and find a different way. It's one thing also, and I think we keep on going back to this Don Lemon comment that he made, is that that's how it used to be. You used to have to start in Billings, Montana, and work your way up. And that's not how it is anymore. It's just truth of the matter. You're seeing people who work at, I think of like Caitlin Collins at CNN. She just turned 30 and she's been at CNN for what, 4 or 5 years now. So the idea that you have to start and work your way up in these tiny markets, that used to be how it worked. And I think that maybe some people who are older are like, well, I had to work in, nowhere, Nebraska, so you should too, but that's just not the reality. So they're telling you no, but that was a no for them. That doesn't mean it's a no for you. So I think you don't ever take a no. Just, okay, fine, not right now is what I would say. Take it as, and you have to have that attitude and not take it personally. One person's opinion is not everybody's opinion of you.
And Candace, I forgot if you mentioned this at the beginning, but just so everybody knows, Candace is consistently anchoring at Eyewitness News as well. Brandon, same question.
I think the failure is kind of like the fire under me that keeps me going, keep me hustling. At my very first internship, there was someone who had been there for like 20 years and they were a runner. That's kind of, and there's some people that like being where they are, which is also fine as well. But in my head, I was like, I don't want to be like this person where I'm at the same place for this long in the same position. And so kind of every time I moved up, it was like, I knew what I didn't want to be and where I wanted to be. And that was the fire that kept me going and moving up and working hard. And I think that specifically, I remember one time I was at Dr. Oz, I was a celebrity booker there, and I was like, I want to be a celebrity producer. I was an associate producer booker. And then I was like, my next job, I want to be a producer, producing celebrity interviews. And one of my very close friends who was a producer told me, he's like, that's not going to happen for you. You need to start back at the bottom. And it's going to take you at least another 5 years into being a producer. And I was like, that's not going to be my story. And my very next job, I not only was I a celebrity producer, when I first went into the interview was for an associate producer job. And they were like, look, we want to make you a producer. And that's how I ended up on that path. And so my one thing is like, it's great to get advice from other people, from mentors and stuff, but you always have to listen to yourself and be loyal to yourself first, because you know your goals, you know your path, and you know yourself best. And people, it's like it's good to get other opinions, but they're coming it from their life story, from things they have been through, and it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be your story as well. So I always say, even with jobs, yes, you want to be loyal to your jobs, you want to work hard, but you have to be loyal to yourself first, because that's the way to get you further.
Marina, have you ever failed?
I have. So I think another form of rejection that people don't talk about a lot is when you are at a job and you found that you are limited. And this happened to me both at New York One and at Pix. And I think you put in all this work and you've done all these things, and then you go to management and you're like, look, I want more pay, or I want to try this, or I want to feel like I want to grow. And like both Brendan and Candace said, I think the industry has people who have been here for a really long time, who see TV or journalism as this concept of like, it's one thing and you do this one thing and you do it forever and you're happy and you don't ask for more, and this is what it is. And I think it's kind of navigating sort of like, well, I know I'm worth more. I've put in the work. Also not asking too early on, because if you go into a place and you're like, I want to do this, and you've been there for 2 weeks, that's not going to work. But I think it's recognizing your own worth, and also realizing that rejection sometimes comes 3 years into a job, when you go to someone and you're like, hey, look, I really want to stay here. I'm being offered this, but I really love this place. And I really just want like $2 more an hour, even though the other place is offering me more money. And rejection comes in the form of like, no, sorry. And I think then you watch what sometimes they do with that budget, and you're just like, wait, I could have stayed and you could have just given me $2 more an hour. It is what it is. It's in the past, obviously. But I think rejection comes sometimes by people that you trust and people that kind of help bring you up. And then it comes to the point where you realize like, I'm stuck here and it's time to move on. So I think it comes in many forms. Another thing I want to touch on is that I think there's this, I'm not on camera, and I think Candace and Darissa can talk a lot more about this, but there's this perception of like, I'm going to be on TV and it's just like reading a paper. Like, these are people who write, who go out, who get their own interviews, who are up at 2 o'clock in the morning, who are reading, are checking scripts. So I think there's also a conversation that needs to happen of like what goes into being a ganker and being a reporter, which when I was in college, it really wasn't a conversation. It was just kind of like, these people get here and they get here and then they read scripts for the rest of their life. Like, it's a lot of work, and the people that you see on TV are doing a ton of work behind the scenes, which I think is not really talked about enough. So yeah.
Yeah, just quickly on that, the thing about the different forms of rejection, two things popped into my mind immediately, and that is two big like rejections from New York One and Eyewitness News. At New York One, at one point, I was going for a senior producer job, and I was somebody else was picked, and I had to, and there wasn't a lot of like follow up to that. It's just like, this is the direction we're going. I wasn't really sold on the reasoning for why it was, and I had to, and well, I had to, sorry, Darissa just texted me something funny. While I had to make like a decision in my head. Like, I was like, do I have a future here? Do I have a path? Because I think the one thing that we all have in common is that we're not comfortable almost ever. Like we're always thinking about what's the next step? How do I continue to improve and get better in our careers? And I was like, can I do that here? And my conclusion was no. And I needed to move on, despite all that New York One did for me. Then at Eyewitness News, started over, did the same path, became trusted, got to the point where I was basically doing a on-the-job tryout for the 11 p.m. producer, which is probably the most important show at Eyewitness News. And I did that for a couple months, and then they decided to go with somebody else. And that initially, stung a little bit. But the same day that happened, the anchors, Bill Ritter and Sade Badr-Anwar, and the executive producer of the FM all came up to me individually and was like, hey, we were really impressed with how you handled that. And you have essentially said, you have a future here. And that's all I needed to continue on, to feel like I had a path there still. And then sure enough, it was, I think within a month, I became the producer of our 6 a.m. show. So it's not, I'm not saying to not think about, you know, how about your career when some sort of failure rejection comes up, but just keep it in perspective. Darissa, your response to my question.
The question was, have I ever failed?
No. We've spoken a lot. Everybody fails. Like, how do you deal with your failures and rejections that you've had in the past, especially early in your career?
I think that what Candace said was really important. You know, you really have to kind of look at who the person is giving you this advice, and are they not really projecting, but are they speaking from their own perspective? Because you know, kind of just like what Don Lemon said, right? Like, you had to go through them. He had to go through the markets. He had to do that. That doesn't mean I have to do that. And just because somebody else failed, that doesn't mean I'm going to fail. So I think that one thing that I did was, I mean, I did fail. I mean, I failed a lot. But you just kind of navigate around those failures and, you know, keep going, because I mean, I'm failing. John knows this. I was failing last month at something, but I navigated around, and I was able to, you know, change departments essentially. So I think that it's really about perspective. Is it really a failure, or is it an opportunity for you to grow? And that's how I look at my failures. I hate to be cliche or corny, but that is truly what a failure is. It's not you quote unquote failing. It's you looking at the failure and saying, okay, how am I going to navigate around this? And how can I grow from this situation? Okay, that's all.
That was beautiful. Very succinct.
Just to piggyback.
Go ahead.
Just to piggyback off that, one thing we talk about failure and rejection, I specifically remember a time at one of my jobs where I had all these ideas, and my boss was younger in my career, I think it was like 23. And she literally said, "You don't know anything. You're just 23-year-olds. Just do what I'm asking you to do and kind of carry on." And so for a long time, I didn't talk about my age at work because I didn't want that to be a distraction or a deterrent for any reason. And one of the producers there, she called me in her office and we were talking about like the situation. And she said to me, like, just because people are older than you, that doesn't make them better than you. It doesn't make them smarter than you. And that I kind of kept that in my mind, that we all, especially this industry, is very subjective. People have different approaches. You could write a script one way, one executive producer could love it, another executive producer could hate it. And for me, it just goes back to like being confident and working hard. Yes, I failed. Yes, some of my scripts do suck, but at the same time, it's like you have to just believe in yourself and keep moving and not let these outside factors that kind of stuff.
100% agree. 100%.
Yeah, I love that. That's real.
Yeah. Also, Darissa, I would quibble with you recently failing. That's a conversation for another time. But I would say like that's more like overcoming serious adversity, oftentimes not at your own expense, which I think you did amazingly. So we're just about wrapping up here. I want to toss it over to Irina a little bit here. You are our student/alum representative here. It's important to hear from you. First question, you're not driving right now, right?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. It's just
okay. No, just making sure. I don't know if you're in a Tesla and that's like on autopilot or something, but okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and kind of what your goals are as a, you know, either an early or a prospective journalist.
it's a pleasure to meet all of you. So thank you for this opportunity to listen to all of your stories. I major in atmospheric and oceanic science. So I want to become a TV meteorologist, but I minor in journalism. So my goal is, of course, to graduate. So my academical life is boiling now. I'm taking 20 credits, dropped a class, might fail one, not sure, but I'm doing what I can. So my goal is to, as of now, before I graduate, is to find a summer internship. I'm an intern at CFN, Catholic Faith Network in Long Island right now. I'm not sure if I'll be able to stay over the summer with them. So I'm looking for something over the summer. So yeah, internships, hands-on experience, learning how to be a professional. These are my goals I have set for myself prior I graduate. Yeah.
So, does anybody have any thoughts on how they would handle like Arena's next step? Let's basically like talk like what we talked about earlier, putting all of our stories together and our experiences and applying them to some like a real world scenario here. Is like what would be like the most important advice you would give to Arena right now?
I would say, Arena, send every single person on this Zoom call your resume and you'll have an internship this summer. And that's the end of it.
So let me just say something quick on that. So something I've also said to rooms of students that I've spoken to. I remember I think I went to I don't know, I forgot if it was a high school or a college in Queens, maybe, or York College. Does that sound familiar? Is that a real place? Yes. So yeah. So I went to speak to a group of students there in just as a producer at New York One. And one of the things I said at the very end was, I'm going to put my email up on the board right now. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to hear from like 2 of you out of the 30 people in this room. And those people are going to get internships. It's amazing how simple it is to get a foot in. It is, and we've touched on this a little bit during this discussion, it is a matter of just even putting in a little bit of hustle. A little bit of hustle can get you really a long way. A lot of hustle can get you in the situations that we're all in now, to put it as succinctly as possible. Anybody else?
I think one thing that I did, especially early on in my career, was I would, first of all, keep in touch with everybody that I worked with for months after, years after, whether they responded to my emails or not. I would still email them. Specifically, one of the executive producers at one of my internships, I would email him every 3 months. I think I had like a reminder in my calendar to email him. Never responded. One day I was in line at Chipotle. I got a random call. It was him. He's like, hey, we have an open position. Do you want to come? And he recognized, granted, he didn't have time to respond to my emails, but he recognized the hustle behind that. And it shows your drive and your eagerness to work. And that shows, it translates to someone that they would want on their team. And the other thing, I did a lot of cold emailing. If I would see a job posted online, I would figure out the formula to the email address and I would just send out emails. Some of these people responded, some of them didn't. But I was able to get a lot of internships and jobs like that. I remember my job at TMZ. I randomly reached out to the recruiter. She said, I never respond to these kind of emails, but I looked at your resume and you seem like a great candidate. So it really is like not giving up and being persistent.
The rest of Marina.
I think too, there's just so many ways to network nowadays that just didn't exist even 5 years ago. Sending a Twitter DM, following someone, being on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of times we have this perception that people, like Brandon said, a lot of people don't respond, but they're reading it. Like I work with Bill Ritter, who goes through every single Facebook message he gets every night. Like he's obviously on another level, but I think we have this perception of like, these people aren't reading, they're not responding. Everyone's reading, maybe they're not responding, but they're gonna respond. I think there's so many different ways to just kind of get around. I also think that now more than ever, people are just starting to do their own thing. There's people who have Twitter profiles and they go out and they chase news. There's, I think there's kind of your own way to do something. There's a stringer who works in New York, and a stringer is someone who goes out and shoots their own news, and then we can decide if we want to purchase what they're shooting. They're a freelance photographer. And she's from Ukraine, and she went to Ukraine. I'm not saying anyone listening to this should get up on a plane and go somewhere, but she flew to Ukraine and she shot all this incredible video of what was happening there. And she kind of created this whole profile for her. She was already what I think is a journalist, but she created this whole thing that now she's like on CNN and she's on here and on there. Like, I think not only is it like I need to get into this job or I need to land this position, but like find a way to make something happen if what you want is not happening. And I think more than ever now that's possible. So that's it.
So I just want to just clarify. So Miranda, you're saying go to active war zones.
That's not
Right.
what I'm saying.
Okay. Teresa, I think you're gonna get the last word on this.
Well, I think that the best course of action is continue doing what you're doing. You are already proving that you're a hustler. Did you just say 20 credit hours?
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine 20 credit hours. That's a lot. I think that you are already doing a lot. Reach out to people. I like what Brandon said, check in with them every 3 months. And yeah, drop your resume to all of us. You're going to get it. You're going to end up where you're going to be, and then do vision boards. I know that John hates that, but honestly, do vision boards. If you see yourself, on the Weather Channel or something like that, put the Weather Channel on your vision board and look at that every single day when you wake up. And then you're like, you know what, this is my goal. My goal is the Weather Channel. You're going to be on the Weather Channel. You just need to keep on going. It doesn't matter how it's going to happen. It is going to happen. You just have to keep going on your course and you're going to end up there. So I'm going to give you my email too. Everybody's given their email.
So it's a great advice. I really want to take a screenshot of all of your emails before we end.
Yeah, and Irina, we'll make sure John gets them to you too. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, feel free to reach out, and anyone who's listening to this, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. All right. That was kind of perfect timing there. We're coming up on an hour. Thank you so much, Irina, for coming in to listen to us talk. Thank you so much to everybody here who participated. And I hope that anybody watching this in the future can glean some helpful advice for their careers, and the best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.